Well, would you look at that? Every year that passes, more information gets leaked out, more memos surface, and more clarifications get quietly slipped into the government archives. And still, nobody wants to talk about the biggest problem with COVID. And the biggest problem is not the virus itself, it's not the vaccine, it's not even the politics that surrounds it all. It's how easy the population can be guided or pushed into silence. This video is not about blaming one side or the other. It's about propaganda and how quickly it can take over when fear is high and questions are inconvenient. That brings me to a question that I often wonder about. Do you think Fauci regrets being a figurehead of the state sponsored propaganda campaign? Propaganda is not always about telling lies. Often, it's about controlling what you are allowed to say out loud. During COVID, you could spot a controlled narrative from miles away because the markers were unmistakable. Dissent was immediately punished. Approved beliefs were aggressively promoted. Algorithms suppressed anything outside of the official narrative. Questioners were labeled dangerous or conspiratorial or even anti science. These are classic features of a propaganda environment. And propaganda doesn't require a villain twisting his mustache in a dark room. It just needs institutions that believe they're too important to be questioned. And once the authorized narrative forms, everything else becomes a threat. I want you to think back to the early months. People weren't asking radical questions at first. They were just asking simple questions like, are there long term effects that we don't know about? Should kids be treated differently from adults? Was the development of the vaccination too fast? What data do you have? And the answer wasn't debate. The answer wasn't transparency. It was sit down and shut up. Don't ask. It doesn't matter if you were a parent, a doctor, a scientist, or even just a citizen trying to understand what's happening. If your questions were not on the approved script, you were labeled a problem. This wasn't normal. This was not healthy. And it definitely wasn't scientific. Science requires debate. Propaganda demands obedience. Guess which one we experienced? Let me know down in the comments. Now let's be real. The vaccine was produced at a breakneck speed. That's not an accusation, it's simply true. Normally, the timeline for a new vaccine looks something like this. It takes years of development, it takes step by step clinical trials, long term data, transparent discussions, and public debate. Instead, everything was compressed into several months because the world was in a crisis. That doesn't mean the science was fake, it means the process was accelerated. But here's the catch. When speed replaces certainty, people naturally worry. And when you tell people, trust us completely, don't you dare ask why. You don't build confidence, you create suspicion. Propaganda thrives when people are scared and starved of information. If you like this message, give that like button a smack. That way we can get the message about propaganda spread far and wide. Fear is the easiest way to control a population. If you keep people scared enough, they'll accept almost anything. Mandates, censorship, punishment of dissent, restrictions on movement, and even policies that contradict themselves. Now imagine being a parent during this time. Every headline told you that your child was in danger. Every news segment told you that there was only one reasonable choice. Every authority figure implied that you were putting others at risk if you hesitated. So millions of parents naturally did what parents do. They acted out of love. And that's what makes propaganda so powerful. It doesn't have to manipulate your mind, it just has to manipulate your instincts. When you shut down discussion, something dangerous happens. Errors go uncorrected. Censorship doesn't eliminate bad ideas, it eliminates feedback, it eliminates critique, and it eliminates the ability to self correct. Think about how the guidelines were reversed later. Masks, school closures, transmission assumptions, booster recommendations, risk levels of different age groups. If discussion had been allowed openly from the start, how many mistakes could have been caught earlier? How much public trust could have been preserved? Society that silences debate is a society that cannot improve. And now, years later, the same institutions that said don't question us are quietly reversing their positions, issuing new memos, and changing recommendations. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When you demand blind trust today and reverse yourself tomorrow, you don't lose credibility, you break something that's hard to repair. And that's the public's ability to believe anything that you have to say again. That's the long-term cost of propaganda. It doesn't just control people in the moment, it permanently alters the trust of the institutions. So what did COVID truly reveal? It showed us that propaganda doesn't always look like posters and slogans. Sometimes it looks like science. Sometimes it looks like suppressed questions. And sometimes it looks like social penalty for thinking independently. The lesson here is simple. A free society depends on the right to ask honest questions. It depends on open debate. It depends on transparency, even when the truth is messy. Because once questioning becomes forbidden, and once fear replaces discussion, then obedience replaces thought. You're no longer looking at public health, you're looking at propaganda. So make sure that you think for yourself, question everything, and demand transparency. I do want to thank you for watching. And if you believe this discussion matters, now more than ever, hit that like button, share the video, and subscribe for more content that digs deeper than just the headlines.